Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. You're looking at the new face of academic freedom. Protesters at Middlebury College in Vermont ruined a lecture planned by sociologist Charles Murray, saying his ideas were so offensive they should not be spoken aloud. And to prove their point, they also assaulted a professor who was briefly hospitalized. In just a bit, we'll talk to someone who agrees with those protesters. But first up tonight, President Trump is launching a fierce counterattack on the subject of Russia and Attorney General Jeff Sessions' meeting with the Russian ambassador, the now famous meeting. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi claimed she never met the ambassador, but then a picture emerged proving that, in fact, she had. You're looking at it now. Another picture surfaced of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer schmoozing with, of all people, Vladimir Putin. Well, today, President Trump tweeted this: "We should start an immediate investigation into Senator Schumer and his ties to Russia and Putin, a total hypocrite." The president later said this: "I hereby demand a second investigation after Schumer or Pelosi for her close ties to Russia and lying about it." Schumer responded this way: "I'll happily talk regarding my contact with Mr. Putin and his associates. Took place in 2003 in full view of the press and public under oath. Would you and your team?" ? Well, meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi tweeted this: "Donald Trump doesn't know the difference between official meeting photographed by press and closed secret meeting his AG lied under oath about." Well, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney represents New York. He has called Sessions a bigot, and now he says he's a criminal, too, potentially. Congressman Maloney joins us now. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Nice to be with you.
So here's the key graph from your press release yesterday. You said this: "We need to look into the bigger picture here and figure out why he, Sessions, perjured himself, and if there's more to this story. We need a no-kidding independent investigation into Russian hacking and influence. What are they hiding?" So the obvious question is, what exactly are you implying? That Sessions is in the employ of the Kremlin? He's an agent? What's the implication of this?
No, but I'm saying we should find out what the truth is, and we shouldn't be afraid of the facts. And I think we all ought to step back and just let the facts play out. Right. It is extremely concerning that he gave false testimony under oath to the Senate, as part of his confirmation hearing. That's enough for me to suggest that he step aside. But I think the bigger issue is what the Russians were up to, because we now have multiple officials who seem to be playing footsie with the Russians and either lying about it, like Michael Flynn, or forgetting about it in the case of Jeff Sessions' statement, or, hiding it in the case of bringing him into Trump Tower to see the president's son-in-law. What's going on with the Russians? And it would be great if both parties cared equally about this.
Right. So I think we know the answers to some of those questions. So to the first meeting that you referred to that Jeff Sessions had with the Russian ambassador, it was now the famous meeting in Cleveland at the Republican convention. That meeting turned out to be set up, actually, by the Obama administration under a program run by the Obama State Department that brought in 100 different ambassadors to watch the convention in progress. And they brought them to this event where Jeff Sessions was. The conference was an educational program for ambassadors. I'm quoting now, the Obama State Department handled all of the coordination with the ambassadors and their staff, of which there are about 100. That doesn't sound ominous to me. It's certainly a very different storyline from the one you're telling. By the way, those are facts. How do you respond to that?
Well, then we shouldn't have any problem with having an independent investigation. I mean, I'll make a deal with you. Let's have Preet Bharara do it. Let's have the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Manhattan, who's put a bunch of Democrats in jail. No one's been harder on Andrew Cuomo. President Trump reappointed him, thinks the world of him. I'll go with Preet Bharara. And I'll tell you what, I'll suspend my call to have the Attorney General resign until we find out what the results of that investigation are.
I'm not sure your call is meaningful in the first place, but let me just say this.
Why?
Before initiating an investigation, don't you think it would be worthwhile if you could point to something that was in fact ominous? So here are more facts, the ones you called for.
I think it's ominous that we have now multiple Trump officials in communication with the Russians about Ukraine and sanctions.
You're going from specifics. No, I've seen this too much. You're going from specifics. We're talking about Jeff Sessions here,
sure,
the Attorney General, whose resignation you've called for, and you're making a general statement. Let's get back to the specifics and the facts that you originally called for. So the second meeting took place in his office. Present at that meeting, and no one disputes this, were two retired U.S. Army officers, colonels, both of them. If there was some nefarious conversation between Senator Sessions and the Russians about influencing American foreign policy in favor of Russia, do you think that those two officers would have remained silent? at this
Look,
point?
I think we should ask them what transpired. I think that's why we want an independent and fair look at this. And
But is there
again,
any
I'm willing to go with
that
the
something
facts.
bad happened?
No,
when many senators met with this ambassador, including many Democrats.
No, excuse me, Mr. Carlson. I said we should have a fair look, and that's why I suggested we have an independent guy like Preet Bharara do it, and we all sit back and let him get the facts out.
But what's so infuriating, if I can be honest with you, is that you're being disingenuous. So you know that this ambassador met with many different people on both sides, that he went 22 times to the Obama White House, including during the campaign.
Right.
And yet you're saying
he's
we
the
need
ambassador from Russia. The problem is not that he meets with American officials.
So what is the problem exactly?
The problem is when they lie about it under oath or forget about it or disguise it. And that's what's happened in each of the cases with Mr. Flynn and Mr. Sessions.
No, that's actually not the problem that you're alleging. Okay, so there are two different things you're alleging. You're saying, and I'm just reading right from your press release.
Sure.
You're saying, one, that the Attorney General committed perjury. You make a number of unsustainable points. Committed perjury, which is a heavy thing to say about someone who hasn't been charged or gone to trial, adjudicated or convicted.
Right, that's what we call lying under oath with intent.
Okay, but perjury is a very specific crime that you're alleging, and you know as well as anybody that he would not be convicted in court of that.
Oh,
and by the way, hasn't been.
Oh, no, I don't. I think there's more than enough evidence to convict him.
Okay, but you're saying more. I mean, you know, this is a theoretical conversation. What's not a theoretical conversation is the next part of it where you say, what were they hiding? And I'm just asking you as an adult American who's watching this open-mouthed, wondering, what is this about? What are you alleging? Do you think that the Trump administration worked with the Russians to throw the election in favor of Trump over Hillary? Is that what you're, like, what are you saying exactly?
What I'm saying to you is that there is more than enough here that all Americans who care about our country should want to get to the bottom of it in the most fair way. And I think that the most fair way to do that is to find out why there was a systematic effort that we know existed to influence our elections. That's not in dispute, right, Tucker? I mean, you don't dispute the finding of the intelligence agencies. So we know the Russians were up to this.
I dispute your characterization of it.
Well,
because,
my characterization is we should find out the facts. I don't know why you dispute that.
The facts are these. We can't point to a single instance where the Russians spoke to anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign that we know of about changing the outcome of the election, A. B, we can't point to a single data point that shows that Russian influence affected the outcome of the election. Am I missing something? Do you have facts that you haven't shared?
I didn't say that, but I'm happy to let an independent investigation look at that. But I think what we do know is that they were intensely concerned about sanctions related to their activities in Ukraine. And the Attorney General admitted that they discussed that subject. Michael Flynn discussed that subject and then lied about it. That's more than enough for me to want to know more. So there's a lot of smoke here. Let's let an independent outside person like Preet Bharara, the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, that the president just appointed, let's let him find out. How about that?
So if I said to you, you know, people are saying, Congressman, that you've committed murder, and I'm not saying that you have, but I'm saying people are saying that. And you would say, well, there's no evidence that I've done anything like that. No, I know. People are saying all we need is to put Preet Bharara on the case, get forensic on you, and find out what the truth is. You would say that is an unfair slander against me because, in fact, there's no evidence that anything happened. And this is a similar case.
Well, if that's what I said, it might be undermined had I recently lied about it under oath. And that's, I guess, the point. It's not that people meet with the Russian ambassador. Like, I know Chuck Schumer ate a donut with him. The point is he didn't lie about it under oath.
But
and I guess we're wondering
disingenuous.
why. I'm not being disingenuous.
Yes, you are.
I will follow the facts. I will come back on this show.
Have you watched the tape?
I will come back on this show, and I will admit that I was wrong. If we can have a fair and neutral examination, we need an independent look at what happened. Why are you afraid of that?
What I'm amazed by,
I mean, there was a time when conservatives didn't laugh about the Russians trying to influence our country.
When there was a time when Democrats were
seriously.
calling for war with countries on the basis of no evidence of wrongdoing.
I'm not calling for war.
Well, you had two senators in your party yesterday.
We have an undisputed effort at the highest levels of the Russian government to influence our election. I take that seriously.
Let me ask you
most
an
Trump
adult
voters
question,
would take that seriously.
a nonpartisan question.
I'm sorry?
If you could just get off your talking points for 2 seconds.
Sir, I'm just calling for an independent investigation. I guess I'd be curious why you would oppose that.
And I'll tell you why. Because I live in Washington, and I know that there is a long series of governments who attempt, and some successfully, to influence American policy. And that Russia is not on the top 10 of that list. And so I don't believe that your concern is sincere. I believe this is a purely partisan effort to take out certain members of the administration. And you know perfectly well it is. And so it's a little frustrating to sit and look at you hiding behind the pretense of objectivity. When that's, do you think that Russia is in the top 10 of countries? Name countries that influence American policy.
Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you how it looks like when you don't live in Washington, because some of us don't. I live in New York, and we have a U.S. attorney here who I trust, who the president just appointed. In Washington, D.C. So I'm willing to let the president's appointee, as the U.S. attorney in New York, take a look at it. And the fact is, there is so much smoke here, and Russia is a grave threat to the United States.
Name one specific way that the Russian government influence the outcome of this election.
You didn't hear me say that, so please don't set up that straw man, Tucker. I didn't say that.
You said about 9 times that all Americans should be concerned and that all of us who care about democracy ought to want to know more. Give me one example, one indication that they affected the outcome. You don't have
That's not the standard, sir. That's not the standard that they affected the outcome. No. Hey, if somebody takes a shot at my head and misses, I'm still going to care about it.
Then give me one example.
I mean, look, you can agree. Look,
what exactly are you talking about? Do you believe that they broke into the voting machines?
No.
And affected the vote count?
I don't know that there's any evidence of that, no. But I think that what there is evidence of, and it is not in dispute, Tucker, and I wish you'd take it a little bit more seriously. Look, I watched your interview.
I wish you would take it seriously, Congressman, and not make this into a purely partisan thing, which you clearly are doing. And it's embarrassing to your office that you are.
If I could finish my sentence. I saw your interview with the Attorney General. I thought you did a good job of asking him tough questions and taking it seriously. What is not in dispute?
And he gave me actual answers unlike you.
Excuse me. Don't raise the straw man of influencing the outcome, because I think you know that's a bridge too far.
It's serious enough. It's serious enough. The whole thing is a shabby charade.
To influence the election, and that is not in dispute. Those are the intelligence agencies.
We're out of time. I'm going to say I've taken this seriously from day one. I've asked Democrat after Democrat, give me something real, and none of them have. And I merely get sanctimonious nonsense.
That's why we need an independent look, and then we'll let the facts speak for themselves. How about that?
You're making this into a joke, Congressman. Thanks for joining us. Up ahead, just a few days ago, Mike Rowe had this to say.
If you want to make America great again, you've got to make work cool again.
Well, tonight we'll welcome the founder of an organization that gets kids great jobs without requiring a college degree first. First up, Rand Paul says House Republicans are hiding their Obamacare replacement from him, and he's trying to find it. We'll tell you about the showdown that took place on Capitol Hill. Well, internal Republican Party feuds on Capitol Hill took a weird and interesting new direction. Senator Rand Paul today was traveling around the House of Representatives with a copy machine, claiming he was searching for the House Republicans' Obamacare replacement bill. For more on exactly what happened, we go to Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, it was kind of an Easter egg hunt come early involving dogs, Democrats, and GOP Senator Rand Paul, who supports repealing Obamacare, mind you, as long as it isn't, quote, Obamacare light. So with a portable copy machine in hand and journalists in tow, the Kentucky senator made his well-publicized plea. Watch.
I'm part of the legislature. Shouldn't I be part of the process? I was elected to represent my state, and I'm not allowed to read the working product so I can comment on it?
Senator Paul said he was trying to avoid a repeat of Nancy Pelosi's famous "we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it" comment. And speaking of Pelosi, she and her 2 beagles were also scavenging the halls of Capitol Hill. Pelosi tweeted, quote, "Just helping out Rand Paul. Release the hounds. Where's the bill?" Of course, releasing the hounds usually involves a hunt whip. In this case, they settled for a minority whip. Steny Hoyer, who brought some theatrics to the search by confiding in a former Republican president. Watch.
Mr. Lincoln, I can't find the bill. I know, Mr. Lincoln, you are as upset with your party as I am today.
But apparently the game here isn't hide and seek, it's keep away. House Speaker Paul Ryan says, with all due respect to Senator Paul, that's the way it works. Listen.
That's exactly how legislation is supposed to be written. The things he described are just not accurate. And like I said, when the committees write their bills and put their bills out there to mark up, everybody will see what they've done.
And we're told Wednesday is when the committees will begin to mark up the bill. Tucker.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Trace.
Sure.
Well, Congress has been back in session for more than 2 months, but the day one repeal of Obamacare, remember that? The one we were promised? It has not materialized. Vice President Mike Pence said today that the Republican Party has a unified outlook on this and a repeal is coming soon. Yet some conservatives are already saying that the likely replacement is just diet Obamacare. Eric Novak is an orthopedic surgeon who's long been a critic of Obamacare. He says any replacement the Republican Party passes must promote transparent pricing or will do nothing to fix the rot at the heart of our healthcare system. Dr. Novak joins us tonight from Phoenix. Doctor, thanks a lot for coming on. So,
thank you, Tucker.
How do you get to that? I mean, it's often noted that most patients have no idea what anything costs in their journey through the medical system. How do you fix that?
Well, the lack of transparency has been a big issue at every level of healthcare for a long time. And we just have to take a step back and figure out why it's important. If we look at healthcare spending in the country, 1/2 of the country, so about 165 million people, only account for a little bit less than 3% of the costs, which means that they spend on average less than $300 a year on healthcare services.
Okay.
So we need to be thinking about how can we put policies in place that really encourage people to get access to those prices and be able to use their own resources to get it.
To use their own resources to get the prices or to pay for their own healthcare?
Well, to pay for it, I think one of the challenges that we've seen is with the massive increase in prices of premiums. Right. Not only are people seeing the significant copays, co-insurance, deductibles go way up, but the complexity of getting the care has gone up, and the premiums have skyrocketed, not only in the individual market, but also for the employer market as well when you look at the family policies and deductibles.
Yeah, it's crushed a lot of people. So if you were rewriting if you were replacing Obamacare with something better, what are the first 2 or 3 things you'd do?
Well, I think you need to recognize that it did create a new entitlement, and conservatives and fans of limited government would love to wipe it clean, but the reality is that insurers, hospitals, and providers have spent 6 years spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars trying to adapt. So simply wiping the slate clean will not be effective. So I think there needs to be a recognition of that.
Yes.
We need to recognize that an open-ended entitlement of Medicaid is being abused by all the states, including the Republican-driven ones, and really the country and the federal government has to get a handle on that and make that stop.
The abuse of Medicaid. So how would you make that stop? By not reimbursing at the rates we are?
No, I think one of the things that even President Obama had in several budgets is a recognition that the way states get federal funding is very easily gamed. And actually, you have many Democrats on record saying that that system wasn't effective and could be too easily abused. Right. So there is a whole series of tricks and techniques that really states spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more on consultants a year to try to figure out how to pull down tens of millions of dollars more of taxpayer federal money. So figuring out some way that we can either block grant or capitate it in a way that there can be some control of this is incredibly important.
So in Obamacare, I think the mandate is the least popular part, according to polling, and the most popular part is the pre-existing conditions part, that insurers have to take you even if you're already sick. Can you have a system that requires insurers to do that without having a mandate for everyone to buy insurance?
Well, I think you can come up with solutions that get at it from a different direction. So the first thing to recognize is while half the country spends almost no money on health care, a very small percentage of the country spends the vast majority of the dollars. And societally, we are not going to let those people go by the wayside.
Right.
And so finding some ways, whether it is through high-risk pool funding or reinsurance funding through the individual and even employer market, to be able to allow some of those high-cost individuals to be pulled out so that these families that are now paying $300, $400, $500 a month only to have the luxury of having a $6,000 deductible can see those costs come down.
That's exactly right. And a small group of healthy people, I mean, the bulk of healthy people supporting a small group of high-cost patients. Dr. Novak, thanks for joining us. That was interesting.
Thank you.
Well, up next, a bunch of spoiled children at Middlebury College in Vermont forced the cancellation of a speech by Charles Murray. They said his ideas about inequality were so offensive that they had to be censored. They could not be heard. I talked to a professor who says Murray's ideas are that offensive and they shouldn't be heard. Sociologist Charles Murray was supposed to speak yesterday at Middlebury College in Vermont, and he would have done so if a mob of protesters hadn't decided to stop him. Watch. Well, students at the $61,000 per year college called Murray a sexist, anti-gay white supremacist, and otherwise screeched until administrators finally canceled the event because they had to. Protesters later jumped on Murray's car in an attempt to keep him from leaving campus safely. They also injured a professor who was escorting him, forcing her to make a brief stay to the hospital. Well, Carolyn Rouse is an anthropology professor at Princeton University. When Murray spoke at Princeton last year, she led students and faculty in a walkout of that event. Professor Rouse joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I've read a lot of the criticism of Charles Murray, with whose work I'm pretty familiar, and they don't bear much resemblance to what Charles Murray has actually written. And so I just want you to put a fine point on your complaints about Charles Murray. Why is he beyond the pale? Why should he not be allowed to speak?
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to. What are you referring to in terms of his work? His writing?
Well, a couple of things. At Middlebury, he was denounced as anti-gay. He's not in any sense anti-gay that I know of. He was a proponent of gay marriage. He was also denounced by a lot of people, including you, as a purveyor of racial pseudoscience. And whatever you think of his ideas, I don't think anyone would denounce them as pseudoscience, considering the book that you're referring to was written by him and by Dick Herrnstein, a Harvard professor, a real scientist. So I wonder what you're talking about exactly.
You mean you think that black people have lower IQs than white people?
No, I think that the bulk of Charles Murray's scholarship has nothing to do with race at all. And I'm wondering, to be totally blunt with you, Professor, if you've read his books.
Yes.
Which ones did you read?
The first one I read was Losing Ground in college.
Right.
Did you read?
Okay, I beg your pardon. Go ahead.
Well, that was a really interesting book for me because the argument that black people were culturally dysfunctional and had all of these behaviors that were incompatible with democracy and capitalism to be fascinating but completely false or fake news.
Okay.
Given that I know the black community well.
Right.
So yes,
I read the book too.
That was my wake up.
I don't remember him making the case that black people were somehow unable to live in a democracy. Did you read The Bell Curve?
I read parts of The Bell Curve, yes.
Okay, but not the entire Bell Curve.
No, I didn't read the entire Bell Curve, and I read the critiques of The Bell Curve as well.
Okay.
But are you know, the
So
Southern Poverty Law Center has a dossier on him. I don't want to debate whether or not he's made claims about the sort of the degeneracy of black people and poor whites. It's just a fact. So if you want to talk about freedom of speech and his right to speak freely, I think that makes sense. But what he's written is out there for the public, and I don't think that we need to debate that.
Well, but that's kind of your point, is that it's known and we don't need to debate it. But you've already conceded that his central work, The Bell Curve, you haven't actually read. You've read critiques of it, you read part of it, but you haven't read the book. And instead, you point to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a political organization. I'm just saying, shouldn't you take the scholarship seriously? And then, if you disagree, explain why.
You know what? There's a black man who wrote about how people with more melanin are more intelligent. Do I need to read this work? Do I need to invite this person to Princeton to speak because he's written about how black people are more intelligent than white people? Do I need to waste my time? Do I need to waste your time? Do I need to waste the institution's resources because he said it? Just because somebody says something doesn't mean I need to be wasting my time reading every word they've written. I have other things in my life to do. They're more positive and constructive and more interesting scholarship out there. Oh,
sure, but one of the things that you're spending your time doing is trying to prevent other people from expressing their views on the basis of incomplete knowledge.
Not at all. We didn't at all. We let him speak. We didn't shout him out. We literally just walked out the door before he spoke.
But don't you think, I guess the larger point here, and it seems like it would appeal to you as an academic, is that if you disagree with the point someone is making, you should understand exactly what it is they're saying, because the Bell Curve was not primarily about race at all.
Do you know that?
And
how much
you're not
energy we black scholars and people who worked on African American have had to spend so much time challenging racist scholarship and not enough time doing positive work. At some point, we have to stop paying attention to this. just because somebody says something and they're wealthy and privileged doesn't mean that we all need to go running and accept it as good scholarship or treat it as legitimate. There's a lot of bad scholarship out there.
But
his work is bad scholarship.
But you don't know what it is because you haven't read it. You haven't read the entire book, which was not about race except for a small section of it. And it was actually an important book. So I would think you'd want to grapple with the ideas in there, but you don't. And I wonder why.
Do you know how many important books I bet you haven't read?
Many. I'm not weighing in on them in the way that you are.
Yes.
You're passing judgment on something you don't understand, and that's what bothers me.
You said I don't understand it. I do.
That's correct. What's the thesis of the bell curve?
I do work in biological anthropology. There's absolutely no such thing as degeneracy of a certain population, which he claims based upon poor whites are degenerate, poor black people are degenerate. He has a thesis that these genes are floating in these populations and they're no longer able to take advantage of the freedoms and democracy that we have in this country. And so therefore, you know,
having read the book, I think you're grossly mischaracterizing it. Grossly mischaracterizing it, and I'm surprised that if you're claiming you read the whole thing. But let me ask you the free speech part, which you brought up. Do you think that people have a right to say things that you find offensive? Do you agree with the Middlebury protesters?
Absolutely. Oh, do I agree with that? Well, those are two different things.
Well, if you're supporting shouting someone down, obviously you don't think people have a right to say what they think.
We never shouted Charles Murray down. He was allowed to speak. Our protest was about internally.
I'm sorry. Right.
So Tucker Carlson.
Yes, sir.
We have a limited pool of resources at Princeton.
Right.
I don't think we need to be spending money on this. There are many, and your audience knows this, many lower middle class white people, many working class white who would love to get an education. Let's spend that money on helping them go to school, right? That's what we need to spend that money on, not on constantly sort of giving money and resources to scholars who already we know their scholarship just doesn't pass the medal. So
by the way, you're overstating the degree which there's a consensus on that. I think a lot of serious people regard Charles Murray as serious. But let's get to the Middlebury protest. Do you think it's okay for people to prevent a speaker from speaking because they disagree with him?
No, that's why we didn't do that.
Okay.
They're allowed to speak, but we do not want our institutional resources going towards, for instance, somebody who claims that people with more melanin are more intelligent. We don't want that kind of stuff in our university.
Charles Murray didn't claim that. He didn't make that claim.
No, but there are people who do. That's my point.
Okay.
It's his work is as absurd to me as that.
Yeah. Well, I would challenge you to read it and then pass an informed judgment on it. I think that might be more effective. We're out of time. Professor, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Earlier this week, Mike Rowe came here and told us this.
5.6 million jobs exist right now as we're talking. 5.6 million jobs, 75% of which don't require a four-year degree.
Up next, we'll welcome the founder of an organization that is helping kids skip college and go straight into skilled, maybe even excellent jobs. You may not have heard of this before. It could change everything. Well, the price of college continues to rise year after year, faster than any other commonly used commodity in American life, and far faster than the official inflation rate. Even at public universities, tuition is now routinely above 10 grand a year. Don't even consider the most expensive private schools. It'll make you sick. It'll also put you in debt. Well, thankfully, some innovative minds see the situation and ask the obvious question, which is, what's the point of all this? Isaac Morehouse is the founder of Praxis. It's an organization that places young people in apprenticeships with tech startups without requiring them to attend college first. It's a really interesting idea, and Isaac Morehouse joins us now. Isaac, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Tucker. Glad to be here.
So why'd you do this? What was the need you wanted to meet with Praxis?
You know, I had spent a lot of time working with young people, high school students, college students, and seeing them graduate and say, I've got all this debt, but I can't find, there are no jobs. And then I started working with, I switched jobs, this was before I launched Praxis. I started working with a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners. And I'm hearing them say, I'm hiring all the time. I just can't find good talent. And I thought, okay, something is amiss here. People are spending all this time, 5 years on average, thousands of dollars, sometimes six figures, and they're coming out no better prepared to go and create value and to get a job than they were when they went in.
Exactly.
In fact, I would argue sometimes they come out worse because they pick up some habits and mindsets that are really antithetical.
You just stopped right there. That is totally true, and nobody ever says it. College helps a lot of people, also destroys some people. That's real.
Absolutely. I mean, we see that all the time. Actually, at Praxis, when people get into the program, if they've had some college especially, we joke about we have sort of a de-schooling process because the mindset of obey the rules, follow procedures, chase credentials, chase grades, and wait to be told what to do, and you'll be handed this magical ticket to a job. It's just not true. I mean, if you stand in line with your resume and says, look, I have a degree, hand me a job, whether or not you have a degree, you need more than that today. But the good news is it's easier than ever to do more than that, to demonstrate your ability to create value, to embark on projects and things that, you can show, not just trust this degree, but here's what I've done, here's what I've built. And that's really what we're all about, is trying to place people in a position where they can learn by doing.
So you're, in effect, a placement firm for people who are bypassing college and want to go right into the workplace. Is that right?
It's a little bit more than that. Actually, it's a lot more than that. But that is definitely a key part of it. So the program, we have a 3-month boot camp where if you've got the raw drive, if you've got the work ethic, I call it the sleep in your car test. There are people who are willing to sleep in their car to get what they want in life, and those who aren't. If you've got that, the skills can be gained. You can learn those relatively quickly if you have that drive. So we help prepare our participants with this professional boot camp. We help them build a personal website. We help them gain some specific skills that are going to be valuable for some of our business partners. And then we place them in a paid apprenticeship. They're getting regular coaching. There's a curriculum along with Praxis and a whole community. And it's really about a mindset that no one's going to give me anything. No one's going to give me a job.
Right.
No one's going to give me job security. I've got to create that for myself. Whether or not I actually start a business, I have to think entrepreneurially. And I'm telling you, there is more opportunity than ever out there today. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't see it. They just see fear, and they're worried, and they're looking for some guarantee, so they're sinking themselves into debt, and they don't have to.
So quickly, by the way, we're putting the explanation of your company and your website on our Facebook page so for our viewers who want to know more. But if I've got kids and they're thinking about whether or not to go to college, I could call you up with some assurance that that child will wind up in a decent job?
Absolutely. I mean, if you get into the program, and again, what we look for is that drive and that ambition, the work ethic. If you get in, once we place you in an apprenticeship, you're guaranteed to get a job at the end of the program. So absolutely. I mean, and that's why we have to screen for quality people, but also we're there to coach and help. Our advisors work with participants throughout their apprenticeship and beforehand to guarantee that they will succeed in those roles. And the businesses we work with, they love us. I mean, they come back and they say, give us more of these people. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I'm just glad that out of a country of 330 million people, someone is thinking for himself in an original way. Good for you.
I mean, it almost seems so obvious in some ways, this apprenticeship concept of learning by working with people who are doing, but yet we've got this weird, bizarre mentality where people are paying tons of money to be kept out of the real world. And then all of a sudden they graduate and being taught by people, most of whom have never really worked in the business world. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of backwards. So, and I mean, the idea of America itself is, we're a country of hustlers, grinders, innovators, crazy people who aren't willing to take well enough alone. And that mindset kind of gets beat out of you in the school process. So we're trying to just tell people, hey, get out of the classroom, and we'll put you into a business, and you can learn, get your feet wet, learn, get forged in the fire.
I'm going to have to stop this interview because I'm going to start sucking up to you in an embarrassing way because I love this idea just so much.
Well, I'm a talker, too. I chat a lot.
No, I love it. I love every part of it. Isaac, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, the mayor of an American town on the Mexican border is demanding an investigation after his city was deluged with 140 million gallons of Mexican mierda. Sergey Dedina of Imperial Beach, California, it's in San Diego County, says Mexico deliberately dumped raw sewage into the Tijuana River, where it then flowed into this country, and didn't bother telling anybody in America for 17 days. That untreated sewage subsequently washed up on the town's beaches, and residents complained, of course, about the rank odor. The International Boundary and Water Commission has said it will, of course, look into the spill. When Mexico sends us its raw sewage, it's not sending its best. Well, up next, a specter is haunting the Trump administration, the specter of the Obama administration. We'll talk to one reporter who says the press are deliberately letting members of the previous White House sabotage the new one. He'll explain what he means. Stay tuned. Well, has it ever struck you that Trump scandals seem to arrive with precision timing, like clockwork, new revelations cropping up whenever they're needed to sabotage this new administration? Well, maybe it's not just you that's occurred to. Noah Rothman is an associate editor at Commentary magazine, and in a recent piece, he accused the outgoing Obama dynasty of, quote, waging war against the White House, deliberately trying to destabilize the new administration. Noah Rothman joins us now to explain. Noah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So you're saying that there is a method to all this, all these revelations about contact with the Russian government, et cetera, that this is, in effect, being orchestrated.
Well, Wednesday night was particularly frenzied because we had 3 stories that came out with quick succession, one after the other, all of them having the quote-unquote former administration official, the ubiquitous presence. And they're just about all of them are alleging that this administration is doing something that we didn't do, that this particular aspect of how the administration functions is certainly not how we function. I'm not entirely sure it's destabilizing so much as it is an effort to rehabilitate the Obama White House, particularly the foreign policy establishment, which left with a cloud hanging over it.
So here's what we do know the former administration did, and I'm not sure why it hasn't received more attention. We know that the Obama administration spied upon, wiretapped General Michael Flynn as a private citizen in his conversations with foreign officials, and then leaked the contents of those conversations to the press. I don't think that's legal, but in any case, it is a scandal because you shouldn't be spying on your political opponents, right? Why is this not being covered?
Well, it is being covered. It's being covered in the New York Times, but the context is the Obama administration left a trail of breadcrumbs for investigators to discover related to this Russia scandal. If anybody wanted to look into this information, a lot of it was, the classification was reduced, or some of it was, they just allowed people to see information that they didn't want to see. And what you're referring to is transcripts that were apparently taken of calls that were intercepted to Russian officials, which is apparently standard, but the fact that those were transcribed and related to reporters is far from it. This is the kind of thing that we're talking about, and it's being presented as noble and virtuous, and it's valuable information. Don't get me wrong, I'm not making a judgment there, but at the same time, it's not normal. This is very unique.
Or maybe it is normal. Maybe when you have a powerful intelligence agency at your disposal, the temptation to use it against your political opponents is overwhelming. This is what happens in third world countries, for sure. And now it appears to be happening here.
And that's what's disturbing about this sort of thing. What we know about the Flynn situation is that this information came from likely foreign administration or former administration officials, and that it was very sensitive. And how did they get their hands on it, and why did they relate it to the press? We can only know that it's political in nature. I mean, it's presented as such that this administration is very deeply concerned, the last administration is very deeply concerned about the allegiances of members of this current administration, and that's fine, but we're also not investigating the fact that the last administration was criticized very heavily by members of the press, by people on Capitol Hill, by the Hillary Clinton campaign for not responding as forcefully as they should have to the Russian attacks, or the Russian hacks, rather. So the fact that there's a careerist element to this probably deserves a little bit more scrutiny than it's received.
And there always is. So if these revelations are connected, are part of a strategy, where do you expect it to go from here? What's the next?
We're seeing the next wave right now with regard to Attorney General Sessions. He did himself no favors by not being as clear as he could have in Senate testimony. But the information that we received, again, on this Wednesday night flurry of information, that New York Times report about the breadcrumb trail included information about former Senator Sessions' contacts with Russian officials. The Washington Post later confirmed that. All of this came from sources that were not unattributed, but who are talking very freely to the press. So I expect to see a lot more of that. And frankly, this administration probably should get ahead of some of these stories if they want to blunt the momentum.
Yeah, probably. I always thought people who talked about the deep state were kind of conspiracy nuts. I don't think that as much anymore. Noah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Coming up next, we bring you a gruesome case of news abuse. The press had a horrible time fact-checking the president's speech to Congress on Tuesday night. Well, we'll show you what they came up with. It's pretty good.